Chosen one, slow down your breathing for a moment and listen with the part of you that still knows truth before logic interrupts. Because what you are about to hear is not flattery, not exaggeration, not a story crafted to impress your emotions, but a revelation designed to realign how you understand your own existence, your past, and the invisible impact your life has been having without your permission or awareness. Because a few weeks ago, not long enough for memory to preserve it as something important, you did something you classified as ordinary, forgettable, barely worth noticing, and yet in the realm that governs meaning, intention, and consequence, that single unguarded moment caused a reaction so rare that it disrupted established spiritual patterns that have remained unchanged for generations. And the reaction was joy, not polite approval, not measured satisfaction, but a surge of delight so pure it manifested as laughter. The kind of laughter that does not come from humor, but from recognition, the sound of something deeply right being witnessed after a long season of disappointment. And this laughter did not echo from human approval or social validation. It resonated from the highest authority of existence itself. And before your mind rushes to reject this as mistaken identity, before you decide this message must be meant for someone more disciplined, more visible, more religious, more accomplished, let that reflex dissolve. Because the very reason this moment occurred is because you are not those things in the way the world defines them. What triggered this response was not effort, performance, sacrifice, or spiritual ambition. It was something far rarer, something almost extinct in a world trained to calculate outcomes. And that was your instinctive kindness, the way your inner nature responded before your thoughts had time to negotiate, before fear, ego, memory, or self-protection could interfere. And that is precisely why you don't remember the moment clearly, because it wasn't a decision. It was a reflex of who you are when no one is watching, when there is nothing to gain, when no future benefit can be measured. And that reflex revealed something that had been under observation for a very long time, because you need to understand this clearly. That moment was not isolated. It was confirmation. Confirmation that despite years of disappointment, betrayal, fatigue, misunderstanding, and quiet suffering, your core did not harden, your heart did not calcify, your spirit did not adapt to cruelty as a survival strategy. And that confirmation is what produced joy rather than approval. Because approval is given when expectations are met, but joy is released when hope that was almost abandoned is suddenly fulfilled. And that is why this moment mattered. Because for years you have lived with the unspoken question of whether remaining kind in a harsh world is foolish, whether softness is punished, whether generosity only attracts exploitation, and you carried that question quietly. Because you are not someone who complains loudly or announces your wounds. You absorbed them, you processed them alone. You continued forward even while doubting whether your way of being had any value beyond personal cost. And still, when the moment arrived, when life placed someone else's need briefly in your path, your response bypassed analysis. You did not evaluate fairness. You did not measure deserving. You did not ask whether it would drain you further. You responded, and that response carried a signature that cannot be fabricated, because calculated goodness leaves a residue of self-awareness, but spontaneous goodness carries the unmistakable imprint of authenticity. And authenticity is the one thing accusation cannot distort, because it leaves no opening, no leverage, no angle of reinterpretation. And that is why what happened next matters more than you realize. Because whenever something genuine appears in a universe trained to exploit appearances, scrutiny follows. And the role of scrutiny has always belonged to the accuser. The voice that interrogates motives, reframes intentions, and searches relentlessly for inconsistency. And that voice has had no shortage of material across human history. It has built entire arguments from minor flaws. It has dismantled reputations with technicalities. It has turned acts of generosity into evidence of manipulation, forgiveness into weakness, patience into fear. But in this moment, when your action was presented without embellishment, without explanation, without narrative framing, there was nothing to attach to, no angle to question, no motive to undermine, and silence occurred. Not symbolic silence, not polite restraint, but the kind of silence that happens when a system built on accusation encounters something it cannot process. And that silence carried legal weight in the unseen. Because silence in the presence of examination is not neutrality. It is concession, and that concession triggered a shift. Because when accusation has no ground, protection activates automatically, not as a reward, not as favoritism, but as alignment. Because systems are designed to support what remains structurally sound under pressure. And you need to understand something important about yourself now. because this is where your story changes from endurance to movement. Your kindness has never been accidental, it has never been random, and it has never been weakness. It has been resistance. Resistance against becoming what harmed you. Resistance against letting disappointment rewrite your nature. Resistance against adopting survival traits that would have guaranteed easier outcomes at the cost of your inner coherence. And every time you chose not to become harder, not to become crueler, not to close yourself completely, you were unknowingly preserving a frequency that few people still carry, because most people do not become unkind because they enjoy it. They become unkind because it feels necessary, because they decide that softness is unsustainable, that trust is dangerous, that generosity must be rationed, and the world rewards that decision often enough to make it look wise. But wisdom and alignment are not the same thing, and you chose alignment even when it hurt, even when it isolated you, even when it made you question whether anyone would ever meet you at the same level, and that choice accumulated weight over time, because consistency of character creates density in the unseen, and density attracts attention, and attention brings evaluation, and evaluation determines trajectory. And that is why the coming period of your life will feel different. Not dramatically overnight, not like a fantasy narrative, but like resistance lifting, like friction easing, like doors that once required force beginning to open with minimal effort, because protection does not always look like shields and battles. Most often it looks like prevention, redirection, delays that save you, interruptions that frustrate you in the moment and later reveal their purpose. And you have already experienced this without naming it. Those near misses, those sudden changes of plan, those people who faded out of your life just before causing deeper harm, those opportunities that disappeared only to be replaced by something better suited to you. That was not luck, it was filtration. And filtration increases when alignment is confirmed. And now confirmation has occurred, which means your life is entering a phase where your inner nature and external circumstances begin to cooperate instead of conflict. But do not mistake this for ease. This is not a promise of a life without challenge. It is a promise of a life without pointless suffering. There is a difference. Pointless suffering drains, meaningful challenge strengthens, and you are being transitioned from one to the other because you are needed intact, not exhausted. And this brings us to something you may have felt but never articulated. The sense that you were born into this era for a reason that goes beyond personal fulfillment, because you have always felt out of sync with certain norms, uncomfortable with accepted cruelty, disturbed by indifference. Others call realism, and that discomfort was never meant to be resolved by adaptation. It was meant to remain, because it functions as a signal, a reminder, a counterbalance. And there are more people like you than you think, but fewer who remain uncorrupted long enough to recognize each other. And recognition is approaching, not through grand announcements, but through resonance. You will feel it in conversations that go deeper than expected, in eyes that hold familiarity without history, in moments of mutual understanding that bypass explanation. And these connections will matter, not because they form an exclusive group, but because coherence multiplies impact. And when people who carry the same unforced integrity interact, their presence stabilizes environments. It changes how rooms feel, how decisions are made, how outcomes unfold. And that is why isolation was part of your path, not as punishment, but as preservation. Because premature connection would have diluted what needed time to consolidate, and now consolidation has occurred, which means expression follows, and expression brings visibility, not necessarily public recognition, but influence, subtle but persistent. And this influence will manifest through your work, your relationships, your choices, your way of responding under pressure. People will begin to reference you without realizing why, to trust you instinctively, to feel calmer in your presence, to reconsider their own hardness when faced with your steadiness. And you may be tempted to downplay this, to dismiss it as coincidence or projection, but resist that impulse. Humility does not require self-erasure. It requires accuracy, and accuracy now means acknowledging that your way of being has impact beyond your immediate awareness. And with impact comes responsibility, not to perform goodness, but to protect its authenticity, because the moment kindness becomes a strategy, it loses its power, and you have been protected from that trap precisely because you were never rewarded immediately. Immediate reward would have trained calculation, delayed reward, preserved purity, and now the reward that arrives will not be transactional. It will be structural. Stability where there was chaos, support where there was strain, clarity where there was confusion, and peace that does not depend on circumstances behaving perfectly. And you will notice this first in small ways. Improved sleep, clearer thinking, emotional resilience. That surprises you. Reactions that no longer hijack your nervous system the way they used to. This is healing in progress, and healing is not passive. It is the system recalibrating toward its original design, and you are closer to that design now than you have ever been. Which is why you are being asked, quietly but firmly, to continue exactly as you are. Not to harden now that validation is implied. Not to perform now that awareness increases. Not to weaponize your goodness, but to remain unguarded in the same way that triggered this shift, because that is the rarest thing in existence. Unguarded integrity, and it cannot be manufactured. It can only be maintained, and maintenance requires discernment, knowing when to give and when to step back, knowing that boundaries do not contradict kindness, they protect it. And you are learning this balance now, through intuition rather than instruction, because instruction would make it mechanical, and you do not operate mechanically, you operate organically, and that is why your life may never look conventional, but it will be consequential. And consequence is the true measure of significance. So as you move forward, do not look for dramatic signs. Look for coherence, moments where things align without strain, conversations that feel timely, opportunities that feel fitted rather than forced. And when doubt arises, as it will, remember that the confirmation was not about perfection. It was about authenticity under pressure. And that has already been established. It does not need to be reproven, only protected. And protection now comes from alignment rather than effort. And alignment feels like relief, not excitement, like steadiness, not intensity. And this is where your life begins to feel like it belongs to you again. Not because circumstances suddenly become ideal, but because you are no longer at war with your own nature. And that peace is not small, it is foundational. It is what allows everything else to build without collapsing. And if you ever question whether remaining kind still matters, remember that one unrecorded moment, one instinctive gesture, carried enough weight to alter unseen structures that govern protection, influence, and trajectory. And if something so small could do that, imagine what a lifetime of it has already set in motion. And imagine what happens next now that resistance has lifted, now that silence has replaced accusation, now that alignment has been confirmed, and you are no longer moving unseen. You are moving supported, quietly, steadily, irreversibly.